The wedding ring on his finger felt heavier each day. 8 months after the accident, Michael Rodriguez still wore it like a weight that kept him anchored to a life that no longer existed. But when Ellen asked how he was healing, his answer revealed the devastating guilt that consumed him. "I should have died instead of her." Michael Rodriguez, 38, sat in the interview chair with the haunted appearance of someone who had witnessed the unthinkable and survived when he shouldn't have. His left arm hung at an awkward angle from injuries that had healed improperly, and a scar ran from his temple to his jaw, permanent reminders of the night that changed everything. What brought Michael to Ellen's show wasn't his physical recovery, but his struggle with survivor's guilt so severe that he had been unable to function for 8 months. The Ellen DeGeneres Show had invited Michael during their Overcoming Tragedy Week, honoring people who had found ways to move forward after devastating losses. Michael's story had reached producers through his therapist, who believed that sharing his experience might help both his healing and other survivors facing similar guilt. His case represented one of the most severe examples of survivor's guilt following a traumatic accident. What Ellen's audience didn't understand was that Michael had been driving the night of the accident, and that he blamed himself completely for his wife, Isabella's death. They had been married for 12 years, and the accident had occurred on their way home from celebrating their anniversary dinner. A drunk driver had run a red light and struck the passenger side of their car, killing Isabella instantly, while Michael survived with injuries that doctors called miraculous. The accident had happened on October 15th at 11:23 p.m., a date and time that replayed in Michael's mind every day like a broken record. He and Isabella had been laughing about something silly when the other driver's headlights suddenly filled their windshield. Michael had swerved to try to avoid the collision, but his reflexes weren't quick enough to save the woman he loved more than life itself. Michael's survivor's guilt had manifested in ways that terrified his family and friends. He refused to drive, couldn't sleep without nightmares, and had convinced himself that Isabella's death was his fault because he hadn't reacted fast enough. He had stopped eating regularly, lost 40 pounds, and had been hospitalized twice for what doctors diagnosed as severe depression with self-harm ideation. "Michael," Ellen began with extraordinary gentleness, immediately recognizing the depth of trauma in this man. "Thank you for being brave enough to share your story with us." Michael nodded stiffly, his voice barely audible. "Isabella would have wanted me to help other people understand what survivor's guilt feels like." Ellen felt the weight of Michael's loss and the love that still defined him. "Can you tell us about Isabella? She was everything beautiful in this world," Michael said, tears immediately filling his eyes. "Kindergarten teacher, volunteer at animal shelters, the kind of person who stopped to help strangers." Ellen felt moved by the woman Michael had lost. "How long were you married?" 12 years, Michael said. "We met in college, got married young, were trying to start a family." Ellen realized they had been building a life together. "Tell us about the night of the accident." "October 15th, our anniversary," Michael said, his voice becoming mechanical. "We went to dinner at the restaurant where we had our first date. We were so happy." Ellen sensed the painful contrast between joy and tragedy. "What happened on the drive home?" "We were talking about our future, about the house we wanted to buy," Michael continued. "Isabella was laughing at something I said when the other car ran the red light." Ellen felt the sudden shift from happiness to horror. "Do you remember the impact?" "Every detail," Michael said, his hands trembling. "I remember trying to swerve. I remember the sound of metal crushing. I remember calling her name and her not answering." Ellen realized Michael was reliving the trauma constantly. "How badly were you injured?" "Broken ribs, collapsed lung, head trauma, compound fracture in my arm." Michael listed clinically. "The doctors said it was a miracle I survived." Ellen heard the word miracle with irony. "But you don't feel like it was a miracle." "I feel like it was a mistake," Michael said without hesitation. "Isabella was the good one. She was the one who deserved to live." Ellen felt the core of Michael's guilt. "Michael, why do you think you survived instead of Isabella?" "Because I failed her," Michael said, his voice breaking. "I was driving. I should have seen the other car sooner. I should have reacted faster." Ellen realized Michael was carrying impossible responsibility. The other driver was drunk and ran a red light. How could you have prevented that? I don't know, but I should have, Michael insisted. It was my job to protect her, and I failed. Ellen felt the weight of Michael's self-imposed guilt. What would Isabella say if she could hear you right now? Michael broke down completely. She would tell me to stop blaming myself. She would say the accident wasn't my fault. Ellen gently pressed the point. Then why can't you believe that? Because if it's not my fault, then it's just random, Michael said through tears. And if it's random, that means good people like Isabella can just die for no reason. Ellen understood that Michael's guilt served a psychological purpose. It's easier to blame yourself than to accept that terrible things happen to wonderful people. At least if it's my fault, it makes sense, Michael agreed. If it's just random, then nothing matters. Ellen made a decision to bring in professional perspective. Michael, I want you to meet someone who specializes in helping accident survivors. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a trauma therapist who worked specifically with survivors of vehicular accidents and survivor's guilt, emerged from backstage. She approached Michael with the understanding of someone who had guided many people through similar psychological trauma. Michael, Dr. Martinez said softly, I want you to know that what you're experiencing is called survivor's guilt, and it's very common among people who lived through accidents that killed loved ones. Michael looked relieved to have a name for his suffering. Is this normal? Completely normal, Dr. Martinez assured him. Your brain is trying to make sense of a senseless tragedy by finding someone to blame. Ellen felt grateful for professional insight. Dr. Martinez, why do survivors often blame themselves? Because taking responsibility gives us a sense of control, Dr. Martinez explained. If Michael believes he could have prevented the accident, then he believes accidents are preventable. Michael looked interested in this explanation. But I really should have reacted faster. Michael, reaction time in a surprise collision is measured in milliseconds, Dr. Martinez said. No human being could have avoided that accident. Ellen asked about the healing process. How does someone overcome survivor's guilt? By learning to separate what they could control from what they couldn't, Dr. Martinez explained. And by finding ways to honor their loved one's memory through living. Michael looked resistant to the idea of living. But living feels like betraying Isabella. Michael, what would Isabella want for you? Dr. Martinez asked gently. She would want me to be happy, Michael admitted reluctantly. She always said that. Ellen felt the conflict between Michael's guilt and Isabella's love. So being miserable is actually going against what Isabella wanted. I never thought of it that way, Michael said, looking confused. Dr. Martinez reinforced this perspective. The best way to honor Isabella is to live the kind of life she would have wanted you to live. Ellen asked about practical steps forward. What would that look like for Michael? Starting with self-forgiveness, Dr. Martinez said. Learning to accept that he did nothing wrong. Michael shook his head. I don't know how to do that. It's a process, Dr. Martinez assured him. It starts with understanding that the drunk driver was 100% responsible for the accident. Ellen felt the importance of assigning blame correctly. Michael, who was actually at fault for the accident. The drunk driver, Michael said quietly. Not you, Ellen pressed gently. Not me, Michael admitted, as if the words were foreign. Dr. Martinez encouraged this recognition. Say it again. Whose fault was the accident? The drunk driver's fault, Michael said with slightly more conviction. Ellen felt progress in Michael's acknowledgement. What has survivor's guilt taken away from you? Everything, Michael said. My job, my friends, my health, my will to live. Dr. Martinez addressed the comprehensive impact. Survivor's guilt doesn't just affect how you feel about the accident, it affects how you feel about everything. Ellen asked about recovery. What would healthy healing look like for Michael? Learning to live with gratitude instead of guilt, Dr. Martinez said. Being grateful that he survived so he can carry Isabella's memory forward. Michael looked skeptical. How can I be grateful when she's gone? You can be grateful for the 12 years you had together, Dr. Martinez suggested. Grateful for the love you shared. Ellen felt the reframe from loss to gratitude. What are you most grateful for about your time with Isabella? That she loved me, Michael said immediately. That we had 12 perfect years together. Dr. Martinez built on this. Those 12 years exist because you survived. If you had died too, those memories would die with you. Michael looked struck by this perspective. I never thought of myself as the keeper of our memories. Ellen felt the shift in Michael's understanding. You're the only person who can tell Isabella's story the way she lived it. She had so many stories, Michael said, his voice softening. She made everyone laugh. Dr. Martinez encouraged this direction. What would Isabella want you to do with those stories? Share them, Michael said. She loved making people happy. Ellen made an announcement that could help Michael's healing. Michael, we want to help you create a memorial foundation in Isabella's name. Michael's eyes widened with hope for the first time. What kind of foundation? Something that reflects who she was, Ellen said. Maybe helping kindergarten teachers or supporting animal shelters. Dr. Martinez reinforced the therapeutic value. Creating meaning from tragedy is one of the most powerful ways to heal from survivor's guilt. Michael looked energized by the possibility. Isabella would love that. She always wanted to help more people than she could reach in one classroom. Ellen felt the transformation beginning. What would you want the foundation to accomplish? To help kids the way Isabella helped them, Michael said. To save animals the way she saved them. Dr. Martinez noted the shift in Michael's language. Notice how you're talking about what Isabella would want, not what you should have done differently. Michael paused, recognizing the change. For the first time in 8 months, I'm thinking about the future instead of the past. Ellen felt the breakthrough moment. How does that feel? Scary, Michael admitted. But also, like maybe I can survive this. The episode aired 6 weeks later, after Michael had begun intensive therapy and started planning the Isabella Rodriguez Memorial Foundation. The response was overwhelming, with thousands of accident survivors reaching out to share their own experiences with survivor's guilt. Michael worked with Dr. Martinez twice a week, gradually learning to separate his guilt from the reality of the accident. He began volunteering at the animal shelter where Isabella had worked, finding comfort in continuing her mission to help abandoned pets. The foundation launched 3 months later, providing supplies to underfunded kindergarten classrooms and supporting animal rescue operations. Michael found purpose in ensuring that Isabella's compassion continued to impact the world even after her death. 6 months later, Michael returned to Ellen's show for a follow-up, looking fundamentally different. While still carrying sadness, he no longer appeared haunted by guilt. He had gained back some weight and was able to speak about Isabella with love rather than just pain. How are you doing, Michael? Ellen asked with genuine interest in his progress. Better, Michael said honestly. Some days are still hard, but I'm not drowning in guilt anymore. What's helped you the most? Understanding that living my life fully is how I honor Isabella, not how I betray her, Michael said with hard-won wisdom. Ellen felt moved by his growth. Tell us about the foundation. We've provided supplies to 200 kindergarten classrooms and helped 500 animals find homes, Michael said with pride. Isabella's love is still changing lives. Dr. Martinez, who had continued working with Michael, joined the follow-up. Michael represents the possibility of healing from even the most severe survivor's guilt. Ellen asked about his ongoing recovery. What would you say to other accident survivors who blame themselves? That the accident wasn't about what you did or didn't do, Michael said. It was about what someone else did to you. Ellen kept a photo from that follow-up show. Michael holding a picture of Isabella surrounded by photos of children and animals helped by their foundation. His face showing peace rather than the torment that had defined him for so long. Because Michael learned that surviving tragedy doesn't require guilt, and that honoring the dead means choosing to live fully rather than dying slowly from self-blame. That love transcends death when it transforms into action, and that carrying someone's memory forward requires being alive to carry it. and that sometimes the most meaningful way to deal with survivor's guilt is to ensure that your survival serves a purpose greater than your pain. Michael's journey showed that healing from trauma isn't about forgetting or moving on, but about learning to live with loss in a way that honors both the person you lost and the life you were given. He discovered that Isabella's greatest gift wasn't just the 12 years they shared, but the opportunity she gave him through his survival to continue spreading her love throughout the world.